Hey Internet, good morning. Welcome to the September 18th edition of Pearls of Wisdom. I'm Dave Walton from the University of Western Ontario here in London, Ontario, Canada. It's been a little bit since I've posted one of these, and frankly it's been a busy week and about to be a much busier couple of weeks coming up. I'm off to Toronto today for a Canadian Institutes of Health Research pain forum for the next couple of days. Then I'll be back for a few days and off to Tokyo for the International Association for the Study of Pain World Congress. Couldn't be more excited about both of those. This past week, I was quite honored and humbled to be invited to provide a keynote talk for the London Orthopaedic Unit and their annual evening of education. They wanted me to do sort of a TED-type talk, so I decided to sort of show up and listen to the speakers before me, and then to talk really without the use of any slides about where I see physiotherapy either going in the future, where I think we're going to have to go in order to maintain sort of relevance, I guess, as the world continues to progress. Some of you may know that we're coming up to the 100th birthday of physiotherapy here in Canada. 2020 will actually be the 100th birthday. And so it's I've had a bit of time recently for different reasons to sort of reflect on a little bit about where we've been. I've now been a physio I started in physio school in 96, finished in 99, so you can do the math. And in my role as an academic, I spend a lot of my time thinking about where we're probably going, because I want to make sure that the questions I'm asking now are still relevant 2 or 3 years down the road by the time the studies are done and they actually get published. So what I'm going to do here for this session is I'm going to give you one of the things I see sort of coming down the pike for physiotherapy in the next 10 years. I'm preparing a blog post on this that I'll post on the website as well, with a number of other items that I talked about that night and other things that have come up since. Now recognize that many of the things that I'm going to talk about will be somewhat Canada-centric. I am Canadian after all. And so, for example, when I say something like 10 years from now, a Canadian university will be offering a DPT program, and that there will be discussions around making the DPT the minimum entry-level requirement for physiotherapists, again, that's probably only relevant to Canadians. As many will know, the US already has the DPT degree offering. But anyway, that's not what I'm going to talk about today. What I want to talk today, one of the things here's one of my predictions, or perhaps cautions, I guess, for the future of physiotherapy over the next 10 years, and then how I think we ought to go about fixing it. So my prediction here, my caution, is that we are going to get passed by when it comes to measuring and quantifying function and performance by other groups, other professional groups, whether those be kinesiologists, athletic therapists, physio assistants, who knows who these people may be, who are a bit more tech savvy. And I realize I'm making a very sort of broad brush statement here when I say that my experience over the past 20 years or so in this field is that physios have sort of remained a little bit tech phobic. Not everyone, of course, but that's sort of been my experience. When I go to conferences, for example, I might say how many people here, let's say, are wearing a smartwatch, or even a fitness tracker, for example, a Fitbit or something like that, for that matter, which really are pretty mainstream anymore. Maybe 5% of the audience will put their hands up. When I ask a question, something like, who here has ever programmed a smartphone app? Nobody, of course. Now these are physio conferences, recognize. But the fact is, the consumer tech space is moving extremely quickly, and physio has a habit of sort of moving kind of more like this, a little bit more slowly. And now, though, for the first time in history, thanks to wearables and the quantified self movement and all these sorts of things, a patient can come into our clinic and they can say, I will know that I'm recovered or I'm satisfied with your care when I return to the activity level that my smartphone shows I've accumulated over the past year, in terms of steps, in terms of stairs, in terms of sleep quality, in terms of heart rate. The fact is, we're now all carrying around, most of us anyway, who will have a reasonably recent smartphone, are all carrying around quantified metrics of our physical activity, of our physical health to a certain extent. My phone will measure my heart rate. I do it from time to time, and it keeps a graph. It keeps a track of my resting heart rate. I know that I average about 7,000 steps a day because as long as I'm carrying my phone with me, it logs my steps automatically. In fact, I can go back and look at maps of where I've been that day. I can get a sense of terrain. I can get a sense of how long my walks were, how fast I was walking, was I running or jogging, that sort of thing. And when you think about the way we've traditionally measured outcomes, I mean, frankly, the royal we, myself included, are trying to get clinicians to routinely use even paper and pencil-based self-reported outcomes, which include usually a series of activities that we think are probably important to people with, let's say, lower extremity injuries. Can you walk a block? Can you walk a mile? Can you get up from a chair? Can you tie your shoes? Can you hop and jump? Whatever. And we measure those things because we think, on average, people who have lower extremity issues are probably having a hard time with some of those things. But in my mind, the wearables completely changes that game. The concept of the standardized self-report measure will still be valuable from a research perspective. I still need to collect those scores and understand group means and things like that when everybody responds to the exact same item. That's important for me. I still think there's value in it, obviously, from a clinical side. And make no mistake, the wearable space is not yet perfect. There are still plenty of issues around the sort of best form factor. Is it wrist worn, belt worn, around the neck, on the feet, all those sorts of things. Battery life, connectivity with the mobile technologies through Bluetooth or whatever it may be. There are still things that need to be figured out. They're not perfectly accurate either, and I've done the tests myself. There's been a few publications now to show that they're good, but they're not perfect. However, they are consistent. So they're consistent in their imprecision, which means that as long as people are using the same device to measure their activity prior to an injury and after an injury, then we should be able to use that. This is the golden goose in many ways. Rarely have we had the chance to see people prior to their injury and know what their activity levels were like, which is why we've created all of these self-report standardized tools that include items we think are important, we think that people do. But as I say, for now, for the first time, literally first time in history, we are now carrying a record of our physical activity around with us. At least many people are, maybe not physios. So here's my sort of how we fix our risk of getting passed by groups who are more savvy with these things. Is we need to keep our eyes on the consumer tech space. I know I made that comment in an earlier video post. We need to learn better how to critically appraise these devices, which ones are good and which ones are not so good. The same concepts of reliability and validity still hold. Responsiveness, sensitivity to change, all those sorts of things are still relevant. These are still measurement tools. But we need to understand there's additional bits now, right? There might be questions around, again, what part of the body is it worn on? What's the battery life like? How accurate is it? Maybe even what's the sampling rate, perhaps, depending on what it is we're trying to measure. And it goes beyond just physical mobility. As I mentioned heart rate already. There are plenty of peripherals out there that can allow people with diabetes to monitor their blood glucose through their smartphones. There are sleep trackers that actually go under your mattress, not just putting your phone by your bed, but actually putting these things on the mattress. I've got a wearable upstairs here. This is my home office, you'll call it, which of course is actually the kitchen. And that was one that I bought off of Indiegogo, which is one of the crowdfunding websites that I have a mild addiction to. And this one I can train it to recognize certain activities or exercises. So for example, I'll press a button and I'll say, when it sees me doing this, so when the acceleration profile looks like this, I'm doing bicep curls. If the acceleration profile looks like this, I'm doing push-ups. And the device itself then recognizes it. I don't need to tell it what I'm doing. And you start to think about how that could be used for rehab exercises. So my sort of both my warning as well as my opportunity for fixing this is the warning here being that if we don't really start to pay attention to the consumer tech space, gaming is another one. I didn't even touch on gaming, but virtual reality headsets. I mean wherever it's like I say, it's just the space is moving so quickly. Unless we start to pay attention to it, we're going to get passed by. the general public understands a lot of these things probably better than a lot of us physios do. And at some point, it won't be long before someone says, here's my quantified log of activity for the 6 months prior to this injury. Why don't we use that as my outcome? And I think as physios, we need to be prepared to interpret that and to understand how to use it. One sort of final closing thought here is that there are a number of tech-savvy physios out there. I know because I see them sometimes in kind of Twitter wars or sort of blog post wars. There are people out there who understand how to use mobile technology and how to use the internet. And I'm just going to make a little plea here that maybe we can, as a profession, stop sort of our online kind of infighting that tends to occur. My approach to back pain is better than your approach to back pain, which kind of reminds me of the old sort of schoolyard conversations. My dad can beat up your dad. Maybe those of you who are already familiar with the tech space can sort of use that power, use that skill to kind of drag the rest of us along. Help people understand how to use social media, how to use mobile technology and wearables and gaming systems. I know there are a lot of you out there. Let's maybe put your energies, if you can, towards sort of moving the profession forward rather than a bit of the sort of ongoing, Twitter wars that I occasionally witness. All right, there you go, and talk soon.